In 1967, a secret presidential order launched the CIA on an unprecedented mission, not against foreign enemies, but to monitor and manipulate Americans themselves. Authorized as Operation Chaos, the agency built secret dossiers, wiretapped dissidents, and quietly turned respected journalists into covert assets. Declassified files reveal a hidden network that shaped headlines, swayed public opinion, and helped rewrite history behind closed doors. How far did this web of influence reach, and what consequences did it leave for democracy? The answer begins with a single directive. The official story began with a single document, stamped with the authority of the Oval Office. In November 1967, President Lyndon Johnson signed a classified directive that landed on the desk of CIA Director Richard Helms. The order was clear: investigate the possibility that foreign powers were fueling the rising tide of protest and dissent inside the United States. This was a time of deep anxiety. Vietnam War demonstrations filled city streets, civil rights leaders spoke out, and the White House demanded answers. Helms, known for his loyalty and discretion, turned to Richard Ober, a rising star in counterintelligence. Richard Ober's appointment was no accident. He had built a reputation for navigating the agency's legal gray zones, quietly expanding the reach of operations without drawing public attention. The paperwork that followed outlined a new project, Operation Chaos. Its purpose was to collect intelligence on American citizens and organizations suspected of ties to hostile governments. The chain of command was direct. Ober reported to Helms, who in turn briefed the National Security Council and, when necessary, the President himself. Internal memos from the period reveal a sense of urgency. The agency's leadership feared that the anti-war and civil rights movements might be more than homegrown unrest. They could be evidence of Soviet or Chinese subversion. The formal charter for Chaos gave Ober sweeping authority to coordinate with field stations, oversee surveillance, and manage the growing database of names, groups, and activities. Each step was documented, from the initial launch order to the flow of intelligence up the chain. By the end of 1967, the program had a dedicated staff, a secure headquarters unit, and a mandate that would soon stretch far beyond its original counterintelligence mission. The paper trail left behind would become the backbone of congressional investigations years later, but at its start, Operation Chaos was cloaked in secrecy, its existence known only to a handful of senior officials inside the agency. Inside the headquarters of Operation Chaos, the technical staff worked quietly, building a new kind of surveillance toolkit. Engineers designed ways to reach into private spaces without ever stepping through a door. One of their earliest breakthroughs was remote microphone activation. With a single command, agents could turn home telephones into listening devices, capturing conversations even when the receiver sat on its cradle. This technology, described in internal memos from 1968, allowed the CIA to monitor targets in real time, sidestepping the need for physical bugs. Mail interception became another pillar of the operation. Through a system called HTL Ingul, Chaos teams intercepted thousands of letters each month. The workflow was precise. Mail was diverted to secure rooms, photographed page by page, then resealed and sent on to its destination. These images were indexed, cross-referenced, and stored in expanding archives. The process left no visible trace for the sender or recipient, but it created a vast record for analysts to mine for foreign contacts or coded language. Field stations supplied daily reports, but the heart of the operation was its central database. Technicians built custom software to log names, affiliations, and travel habits. Each entry could be cross-checked with signals intelligence from the NSA or raw data from the FBI. By 1972, the index contained over 7,000 individual files and tracked more than 1,000 organizations. Every technical advance, whether a new type of wiretap or a faster mail scanner, fed into this growing network, tightening the CIA's grip on information flow. The engineers behind these tools rarely appeared in official photographs. Their work stayed hidden, referenced only in code names and footnotes. But their inventions transformed chaos from a paper operation into a living system, capable of watching, listening, and recording on a scale never before attempted inside the United States. Stacks of manila folders lined the shelves inside the Chaos headquarters, each one a record of surveillance, suspicion, and silent intrusion. By 1972, the program's central index had grown into a vast archive with over 7,000 files on individuals and dossiers on more than 1,000 organizations. The numbers reflected a dramatic expansion from the operation's original mandate. Every intercepted letter, wiretap transcript, and field report fed into this system. Analysts sifted through the incoming flow, flagging names and cross-referencing connections between activists, students, and suspected foreign agents. Field collectors worked under strict guidelines. Early directives instructed them to document only those with clear foreign ties, but the line blurred quickly. As pressure from Washington mounted, the net widened to include anyone who attended an anti-war rally, signed a petition, or exchanged mail with overseas contacts. Reports from undercover agents described small meetings in church basements, student gatherings in campus halls, and private homes where dissenting voices met after dark. Each detail, names, dates, affiliations, became a new entry in the growing index. The net widened. The process was methodical. A single mention in a field report could trigger a new file. If a person appeared in multiple sources, their dossier thickened with correspondence, travel records, and surveillance summaries. Some files were only a few pages. Others grew to hundreds, covering years of monitored activity. The scale of the operation was staggering, a staggering scale, with thousands of Americans tracked not for proven espionage, but for political beliefs or associations. Inside the secure rooms, the staff rarely questioned the purpose. Their job was to assemble the puzzle, piece by piece, creating a map of domestic dissent as seen through the lens of national security. The index became a tool not just for counterintelligence, but for shaping how government understood and responded to unrest at home. In February 1967, the walls of secrecy around the domestic operations of the CYA began to crack. Ramparts magazine published an expose that landed like a bombshell. Reporters revealed that the CIA had secretly funded the National Student Association for years, channeling money through hidden conduits to influence student leaders and international conferences. The story rested on leaked documents, late-night interviews, and painstaking cross-checks by determined investigative reporters. Their findings filled the pages with detailed memos, financial records, and first-hand accounts that traced the money back to Langley. Newsrooms across the country scrambled to verify the claims. Within days, the story was picked up by the New York Times and the Washington Post. Each added fresh details and confirmed the outlines of a covert partnership between the intelligence community and American civil society. Public reaction was immediate. Student groups demanded answers. Congressional offices were flooded with calls. Editorials questioned whether the government could be trusted to respect the boundaries between national security and private life. Inside the CIA, the leak set off alarms. Senior officials called emergency meetings to assess the damage and to hunt for the source. Directors issued urgent memos warning that further disclosures could unravel years of clandestine work. Agency leadership feared a domino effect. If the student association's funding could be exposed, what else might come to light? Pressure to safeguard remaining assets and to tighten internal controls grew intense. For the first time, the agency faced not just the threat of foreign subversion, but the unpredictable force of investigative journalism. The Rampart story marked a turning point, and it drove the agency deeper into secrecy. Managers scrambled to protect their most sensitive operations and to limit further leaks, an aggressive posture that would shape policies for years to come. The world outside had caught a glimpse of the machinery behind the curtain, and nothing would be quite the same again. Trust in institutions and in the news media had been shaken. The revelations would reverberate through Congress, the press, and the intelligence community, and they would become part of a larger story about how information can be weaponized in modern politics. Covert funding. The financial backbone of Operation Chaos relied on a web of covert funding channels and carefully selected assets inside the media. Payment records and internal memos, now partially declassified, reveal how the CIA recruited journalists under cryptonyms like Podam and Toucan, identities that shielded both the individuals and the true purpose of their work. Front foundations. These assets did not operate in isolation. Money flowed through a series of front foundations, each one designed to look like a legitimate charity, educational group, or cultural organization. The Independence Foundation and San Jacinto Foundation, both cited in congressional records, served as conduits, dispersing grants that on paper supported foreign exchange programs or academic research. In reality, these grants often landed in the pockets of writers and correspondents who fed information back to Langley or helped shape narratives in print. Unaccredited hires. Not every journalist on the payroll understood the full scope of their arrangement. Some believed they were simply sharing insights from overseas assignments. Others accepted stipends or expenses for stories that aligned with U.S. policy goals. In several cases, the agency placed unaccredited staff, photographers, drivers, even stringers, inside bureaus abroad, bypassing editorial oversight. These informal hires could be tasked with anything from intelligence gathering to courier work, their salaries buried in routine expense reports. Operation Chaos. Quid pro quo. Relationships flourished. In return for access, travel support, or help with foreign contacts, journalists provided tips, background, and sometimes direct operational assistance. Internal correspondence shows that agency officers reviewed drafts, suggested edits, and occasionally supplied entire storylines for publication. The money trail, though carefully disguised, left traces in audit records and IRS files. Each transaction, each alias, expanded the reach of Operation Chaos beyond surveillance, into the very core of how information was sourced, shaped, and delivered to the public. London became the nerve center for a different kind of Cold War operation, one that relied as much on the printing press as on the spy toolkit. In the late 1960s, CIA London Station and MI6 worked side by side, exchanging encrypted cables and sharing lists of trusted media contacts. British archives now reveal how these partners quietly seeded stories across Europe, using respected newspapers as delivery vehicles for carefully crafted narratives. A cable sent from London Station in May 1967 described the successful placement of a wire service story about Soviet involvement in anti-war protests. MI6's F branch, the unit responsible for covert action, helped draft and circulate the piece to Reuters, which then distributed it to newsrooms as far away as Rome and Paris. The same pattern repeated throughout the decade. CIA officers met with MI6 liaisons to coordinate editorials and news features, sometimes supplying entire drafts for approval before publication. British Foreign Office files from July 1969 document joint operations to influence coverage of Vietnam War dissent. Officers identified sympathetic editors at the Times and the Daily Telegraph, providing them with background briefings and suggested headlines. One memo details the circulation of an approved draft originating from American intelligence through MI6 channels to London's major dailies. These stories, once published, were picked up by European outlets, amplifying the message well beyond Britain's borders. The BBC and Reuters played a central role. Declassified internal reviews at the BBC confirmed that some anti-communist broadcasts and commentary were shaped by information supplied through intelligence contacts. In the Daily Telegraph, headlines like "Red Fragments in British Student Ranks" traced their origins to drafts circulated by joint CIA, MI6 teams. This international network blurred the line between journalism and covert action. Through these partnerships, the CIA and MI6 shaped not just the news in London or Washington, but the political climate across Western Europe. The cables and memos that survive in British archives offer a rare glimpse into how the Cold War's information battles were fought in newsrooms, as well as in the shadows. In the early years of the Cold War, the world's superpowers recognized that battles would be fought not just with armies, but with ideas. Inside the CIA, a handful of senior planners debated how best to influence public opinion at home and abroad, convinced that control of information would be as decisive as any weapon. Their solution did not take the form of a single formal directive. Instead, a loose network of covert media relationships grew out of a series of classified briefings and internal memos. By the late 1940s, as anti-communist sentiment swept through Washington, agency leaders authorized operations to quietly steer the news. The logic was straightforward. Influence mattered. If the Soviet Union could shape headlines in Prague or Paris, the United States needed its own channels to counter hostile narratives and promote Western values. The CIA's Office of Policy Coordination, led by Frank Wisner, began reaching out to journalists, editors, and publishers, sometimes with offers of access, sometimes with promises of exclusive stories. The goal was to ensure that the American perspective reached foreign audiences and, when necessary, to suppress or redirect stories that could undermine U.S. interests. No single project file or mission statement defined the effort. Instead, the CIA's influence spread through informal agreements, secret payments, and the careful cultivation of trusted media contacts. In later years, this web would be described in popular accounts as Project Mockingbird, though no official charter under that name has ever surfaced. What is clear from declassified records and Senate testimony is that the CIA's media operations were deliberate, systematic, and deeply embedded in the Cold War mindset. The planners believed that information itself was a battlefield, and they set out to control as much of it as possible. Drafts of news stories arrived at CIA headquarters long before they ever reached a printing press. Paid placements were a routine part of the agency's toolkit. Payment ledgers, now partially declassified, show regular disbursements to journalists and editors, sometimes as direct cash, other times masked as consulting fees or travel stipends. A single line in a 1971 ledger lists $800 to a freelance correspondent for a feature on Soviet influence in student protests. Another entry, dated March 1970, records $1,200 for an editorial in a major Midwestern daily. These sums were modest, but the influence they bought was significant. Copywriters inside the agency drafted entire articles, shaping every line to fit intelligence objectives. In some cases, the byline belonged to an unwitting reporter. In others, the journalist was a willing partner, signing off on scripts provided by agency staff. Internal correspondence preserved in the archives details the process. A story would be written, reviewed by case officers for operational security, then sent to a cooperating editor for placement. If changes were needed, the draft circled back for revision, sometimes passing through several hands before publication. In the files, handwritten notes flag which outlets were most receptive, which editors required extra incentive, and which stories needed to be disguised as local reporting. The records reveal a system built for subtlety. Every transaction, every draft, every planted story designed to shape public opinion while maintaining the illusion of independent journalism. The mechanics of this operation were precise, leaving a paper trail that would only come to light years later, when the ledgers and copy drafts surfaced in government investigations. Broadcast propaganda became the next frontier for CIA psychological operations teams. Shortwave radio, with its ability to cross borders and reach millions, offered a direct line into living rooms, from Warsaw to Buenos Aires. Engineers and scriptwriters worked in tandem, producing daily news bulletins, panel discussions, and feature stories that sounded like authentic journalism but followed tightly controlled templates. Each broadcast was crafted to reinforce pro-Western sentiment, undermine communist narratives, and cast doubt on the motives of peace activists and dissenters. Declassified logs show the scale of these campaigns. Radio Free Europe logs reveal schedules that detailed not just airtimes, but also the rotation of message themes, stories about Soviet repression, warnings about the dangers of subversion, and profiles of defectors. Scripts were written to be adaptable, with interchangeable names and locations, allowing the same core message to be broadcast across different countries with only minor edits. Persona templates guided announcers on tone and character, creating the illusion of independent voices from each target region. Message repetition and emotional framing were explicit goals. Internal slides from the period laid out instructions for repetition, cadence, and the emotional beats that would make stories land. Engineers designed broadcast templates so that even in translation, the key points would remain unmistakable. The result was a system that could generate dozens of unique-sounding broadcasts from a single set of core materials. By the early 1970s, these airwave campaigns had become a routine part of the agency's toolkit, reaching audiences far beyond the reach of print or local television. The full extent of this influence would only become clear when logs and scripts surfaced in later congressional investigations. On a Sunday morning in December 1974, the front page of the New York Times carried a headline that sent shockwaves through Washington. Beneath the byline of Seymour Hersh, readers found a detailed account of the CIA's secret domestic surveillance, an operation that had tracked thousands of Americans and infiltrated anti-war and civil rights groups. Hersh's story drew from classified documents and interviews with current and former officials, laying out a pattern of activity that defied the agency's legal boundaries. He described wiretaps, mail openings, and the collection of dossiers on citizens with no evidence of foreign ties. The article, named Operation Chaos for the first time in public, exposed its true scope and purpose. Within hours, newsrooms across the country scrambled to verify the details. Editors demanded statements from Langley. Lawmakers, some caught off guard by the revelations, called for immediate answers. The press, long wary of government secrecy, now found itself at the center of the storm. Hersh's expose didn't just reveal a hidden program, it forced the question of who was watching the watchers. For the first time, the CIA's internal files became the subject of national debate, and the role of investigative journalism as a check on unchecked power was thrown into sharp relief. The story's publication ignited a sense of urgency in Congress and set in motion a series of hearings that would pull back the curtain on decades of clandestine activity. Behind the closed doors of the Senate, the air was thick with anticipation. On July 17, 1975, Senator Frank Church sat at the head of a long oak table, his expression set and unblinking. Across from him, CIA, Director William Colby opened a folder of prepared notes, flanked by agency counsel and aides. The church committee hearings were not just another inquiry. They were a rare moment when the intelligence community faced direct, unsparing questions from elected officials. Church wasted no time. He pressed Colby on the agency's relationship with the American press, reading aloud from declassified memos and staff findings. Colby's answers were measured, but the committee pressed for specifics. Had the CIA paid journalists? Had it planted stories? Colby admitted under oath that the agency had maintained relationships with journalists, less than 50 by his count, including about a dozen full-time correspondents. The admission landed with force. Senators demanded to know how these relationships were managed, who approved them, and whether the public had ever been told. Colby, referencing legal opinions and internal reviews, insisted that the program was necessary for national security, but the committee's skepticism was clear. Staff members produced transcripts, payment ledgers, and lists of cryptonyms, each document tightening the circle. The room was silent except for the scratch of pens and the steady cadence of Church's questioning. For the first time, the CIA's ties to the press were not rumor or speculation, but public record, etched into the official proceedings of Congress. The committee's work set the stage for a reckoning that would soon spill into the open, challenging the boundaries between secrecy and accountability in American life. Television cameras caught every word as William Colby faced the Senate committee. The room was silent, save for the hum of broadcast equipment and the scratch of pens. Colby, his notes carefully arranged, answered questions with the precision of a man used to secrets. Then came the question that had hovered over the hearings: how many journalists had worked with the CIA? Colby did not hesitate. He stated that fewer than 50 American journalists had cooperated with the CIA, including about a dozen full-time correspondents. The admission, delivered in measured tones, landed with a force that rippled far beyond the walls of the hearing room. News tickers flashed the number across the country. For the first time, the scale of the agency's relationship with the press was out in the open, not whispered in newsrooms or suspected by critics, but confirmed under oath and on record. Colby insisted that these relationships were necessary for national security, but the committee pressed for details: how stories were placed, who approved the contacts, whether the public had ever been informed. Memos and payment ledgers were entered into the record, each document adding weight to the unfolding story. The televised admission shattered the illusion of independent journalism and exposed a network of influence that reached into the heart of the American media. In that moment, trust in government and the press faltered, and the legacy of Operation Chaos was sealed in the public mind. Congress responded to revelations of Operation Chaos with a series of legislative reforms meant to place real limits on intelligence gathering. In 1978, lawmakers passed the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, known as FISA, establishing a system of judicial oversight for electronic surveillance and physical searches conducted for national security purposes. For the first time, intelligence agencies were required to seek warrants from a special court before monitoring American citizens, a direct response to years of unchecked surveillance detailed in Senate hearings and committee reports. The same period saw the creation of permanent oversight committees in both the House and the Senate. These new bodies were tasked with reviewing the budgets, operations, and legal boundaries of the CIA and other intelligence services. Their mandate reflected a clear shift. Intelligence work would no longer operate in the shadows, answerable only to the executive branch. Instead, regular reporting and periodic audits became part of agency routine, with committee members empowered to subpoena documents and call senior officials to testify under oath. Declassified legislative records from the late 1970s show the urgency behind these reforms. Lawmakers cited the abuses exposed by the Church Committee as evidence that without statutory guardrails, secret programs could too easily spiral beyond their original intent. The passage of FISA and the establishment of congressional oversight marked a turning point, embedding new checks into the structure of American intelligence and signaling that the era of unmonitored domestic surveillance was over. Public trust in both government and the press faltered in the aftermath of the chaos revelations. National surveys from the late 1970s recorded a sharp drop in confidence. Gallup polls showed trust in the federal government falling below 30%, a historic low at the time. Newspapers and broadcast networks, once viewed as pillars of democratic accountability, faced a new wave of skepticism. Editorial boards launched internal reviews and issued public statements, some acknowledging past cooperation with intelligence agencies, others insisting on their independence. Investigative journalists who had broken the story found themselves both celebrated and scrutinized, as readers questioned whether any outlet could truly claim objectivity. The sense of betrayal ran deep, especially among those who had relied on the press to hold power to account. In classrooms and community meetings, debates erupted over the boundaries of national security and the responsibilities of a free press. The phrase information warfare entered public discourse, no longer an abstract concern, but a lived reality. The fallout extended beyond headlines and hearings. For many Americans, the revelations around Operation Chaos and media manipulation left a lingering suspicion that official narratives could not be taken at face value. This erosion of trust would shape the tone of public life for decades, laying the groundwork for a new era in which skepticism toward both government and media became a defining feature of American society. Long before algorithms and viral hashtags, intelligence planners were already sketching out blueprints for information warfare. Declassified slides from CYA psychological operations units show early templates for message amplification, scripts designed for repetition, emotional impact, and easy adaptation across languages and regions. These templates provided a framework for planting stories, shaping editorials, and even scripting radio broadcasts with interchangeable personas. The intent was to create the illusion of independent voices echoing the same message, whether in a European newspaper or over shortwave radio in Latin America. Analysts today find striking parallels between these Cold War methods and the tactics used in digital influence campaigns. Persona management, once a matter of handwritten character briefs for radio announcers, now takes the form of automated bot accounts and sock puppet profiles on social media. The core principle remains unchanged. Saturate the information space with coordinated narratives, drown out dissent, and blur the line between authentic and manufactured opinion. The Freedom of Information Act continues to pry open the record, but many details about these early influence operations remain redacted or locked behind layers of classification. Modern researchers point to gaps in the declassified files, missing budget sheets, incomplete lists of assets, and heavily censored operational memos. Even so, the surviving documents reveal a playbook that anticipated today's battles over truth and manipulation. The tactics pioneered by Operation Chaos and its allied programs did not end with the Cold War. Their digital echoes shaped the information wars of the present, reminding us that the struggle to control perception is as old as the intelligence agencies themselves. Today, government agencies still debate the boundaries of surveillance and influence. As social media blurs the line between news and manipulation, the lessons of Operation Chaos grow more urgent. The same tools once used to shape Cold War minds now target billions online. In an era of algorithmic persuasion, the question is not whether we are being influenced. It is whether we will recognize it before trust in truth itself disappears.